All right, hello, Honors 100. So I wanted to start this session just by checking a little bit about where we are for this semester. So we're wrapping up week 11 now. Research argument essays are going to be due next week, Tuesday, April 14th. I pushed that deadline back to 11:59 p.m. that day, so you have a little bit of extra time to do it, but I would say please don't procrastinate on that. Please make sure that you are, steadily working on those. I will say again, we're kind of past the point where I'll review full drafts for anyone, but if you do want to send me, just your introduction and thesis statement or an abbreviated outline or a specific paragraph you're concerned about, anything along those lines, I am open to reviewing that for you. And again, would also encourage you, if you're looking for someone to do a peer review with, if you don't have anyone you're already kind of connected with, please feel free to make note of that in the discussion thread and to respond if you'd like to work with someone who's listed there. Again, ordinarily, I would give you some time for some peer review with your classmates, and in, just in not meeting in person, that's not really possible in a conventional sense. But you want to make sure people are still getting opportunities for feedback. And even if you're not working with someone in class, if you're living back at home, encourage you, if you have someone who you can show your work to and just kind of get a second opinion. I think that's really good kind of practice to make sure we're on the right track with that sort of thing, or at least to have some outside input on it before we turn it in for a grade. But okay, so the other thing I'll allude to is that so next class session, next video lecture, I will introduce our final major assignment for the course, which is our creative nonfiction essay. You do have a fair bit of time before it's actually going to be due, so rest assured it's not like these are slamming up right back to back against one another. But just to give you the heads up that's what's coming, and we are entering the late stages of the class at this point. And then for Thursday of next week, what's on the syllabus looks a little funky now because it says no in-person meeting, hybrid class day. Basically, I had intended that I was going to have an obligation that I wouldn't be able to meet with you all as a class on that day. And so I was planning to do something online. I hadn't figured out all the logistics yet. Now, obviously, everything is online. And of course, I'm no longer really having the same obligations that I would have in the ordinary world. So we will still have an online class session for that day. I'm still figuring out exactly what we'll do, but I'm expecting it'll be relatively low key for that particular class. So stay tuned for that. When we go ahead to week 13, there's a reading from Wendy S. Walters that is fairly conventional what we've done for other readings. We'll ask you to still do a journal response, and we'll do a discussion thread on it. And then for that Thursday, I'm asking you to have a page of your creative nonfiction essay written that we'll kind of do some virtual work with. I haven't mapped out exactly how that's going to work in this format, but we'll figure out something along those lines. And then when we look ahead to the final weeks of class, I'm going to introduce again that creative nonfiction assignment in our next video lecture. But one of the components of it is that students have the option to share their work with their classmates and earn some extra points on the assignment by doing so. So we're going to dedicate a fair bit of time in at least our last 2 class sessions and possibly even our last 3 to that. But part of why I want to draw your attention here as well is I realized when I was going over the syllabus and kind of making my plans around all of this that I had made a mistake when I uploaded the syllabus originally to Canvas, where I still had some remnants of the fall with some of the dates and a reference to Thanksgiving in there and things like that. So my apologies for all those oversights and for everyone who was confused looking at that already. If you're working from a copy of the syllabus that you had downloaded, I have uploaded an updated version of that syllabus that's posted to the syllabus link now that has corrected information around all of that. Nothing really of substance has changed, but a few points where the dates didn't quite add up or there were kind of strange references to things that happened in the fall. Those are sort of all cleared up at this point. But okay, with all of that said, I'll get into the creative nonfiction assignment a lot more next time. For now, I don't want to stress anyone out about that. Please do be focusing on your researched argument essays. That should be the main thrust now. That's a big part of why there's no assigned reading for next time. My tentative plan is we are going to do a reading with the class time that we have. So my intention would be after you finish doing your researched argument essay, then you can do that reading that we would have done as a group in class. And then based on that, we'll have our class discussion, but nothing to worry about for now in that regard. But for today's class session, I had to read the Ta-Nehisi Coates essay, or it's technically an excerpt from his book-length essay. And so I have a few questions, and again, specific places in the text I'm going to lead us to. And then, as always, you're welcome to you respond to those questions, respond to those passages I'm drawing you to, but also to weigh in with other pieces that may have grabbed your attention or that you had questions about. So the first thing I wanted to ask was the way that this thing is framed is as a letter to Coates' son, which there's a term for that in literary circles. It's called an epistolary form of writing, where it's framed as a letter or other form of communication that's not just kind of a narrator writing a story. So I want to ask a little bit about what the effect of that is. This is nonfiction, so this is meant to be true. He actually does have this son. So what's the impact of Coates kind of framing this as a letter to his son? Why do we think he would do that? How is it maybe different than it would have been if it weren't framed in that way? Coates refers to white America's progress versus the progress of Americans who believe that they are white. And Coates is a pretty advanced thinker, and he kind of grapples with these issues of race. Another place that I think is pretty interesting is this conversation around the reality of race as opposed to racism, where he kind of makes this argument, at least the way I would suggest that we kind of understand it, is that race isn't even a real thing, that it's a social construction that people have kind of made for kind of pointed purposes. And he further distinguishes that he considers race the child of racism, not the other way around. So in other words, where I think most of us would at least instinctively or traditionally think of it as there are these distinctions between race, and therefore people have decided to develop these views around racism, or maybe it's not that conscious, but they have nonetheless had this instilled in them in some way. And Coates' argument that no, racism comes first. This need to kind of distinguish between people and to discriminate against people comes before even these artificial categories were a thing, which I think is a pretty interesting argument, if nothing else. But I'm curious as to what people make of that, or if you all have different interpretations of what Coates is getting at there. Let's see. So on lower 279, he references this picture of hope and how that kind of represents failure. And he talks about this picture of a black boy hugging a white police officer. And I'm curious, I think we can all recognize where that would be described as a picture of hope. But Coates doesn't seem to agree that that's actually hope. He thinks that that's sort of a failure. What he means, why he thinks that, and kind of the degree to which we might agree or disagree. As we go on to the bottom of page 279, there's this reference to the dream, and this isn't the only place that he mentions it. I would suggest that beyond a more kind of generalized vision of like having a dream about something, he might be making some commentary on the American dream, this concept of sort of America as a meritocracy, where if you work hard and stay true, then eventually you'll be rewarded for it. As well as a reference potentially to Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. And these aren't mutually exclusive ideas. I think they actually feed pretty directly into each other. And kind of but what Coates is saying here, why he's kind of invoking that kind of language, what he's talking about when he references the dream in this way. Moving along, on 282, he references being whipped by a belt by his elders, and he describes it as being done with more anxiety than anger. Again, it's on 282, being whipped with a belt with more anxiety than anger. What that might mean in terms of the person doing the whipping, I think we can agree that's what he's describing. They're not so much angry as anxious when they do it. I think that's again an unconventional view on what's happening in a situation like that. What sense we make of that, because I think Coates does give us some pretty good clues as to how we can understand that idea. So what we want to make of that. And then the final place I want to go is on 285. Coates makes reference to different Baltimores. And of course, I think he's only really talking about one physical place in Baltimore, Maryland, which is where Coates grew up. But I think he is saying something kind of interesting here about the idea that that there are different Baltimores, in the sense that different people might experience Baltimore differently, and or also the kind of concept that some of what he's saying about Baltimore might be generalizable to what other people might say about the places where they're living and their communities, or different environments, or about particularly about kind of the Black experience, right? Because Coates is a Black man, as I hope everyone kind of gets from everything he's kind of writing about here. And Baltimore is a city, I could say this as someone who lived there, that has a very significant African-American population. And so, treating that as sort of a frame of reference for the Black experience in general, I don't think is totally off base. I think that actually makes a fair degree of sense, especially from the perspective of someone like Coates, who early on in his life wouldn't know other places, right? That is his frame of reference for what the world is. So I hope all of that is kind of some useful points for consideration for this reading. So again, just to rehash everything, I'm going to encourage you to give a look at the syllabus and just check in where we are and kind of plan your work for this class. In the discussion thread, again, if you would like to weigh in, looking for someone to do a peer review with you for your essays, please do so. And please feel free to be in touch with me if you have small chunks of your essay, let's say up to a page or so's worth of content you'd like my input on before you turn it in. I'd be happy to look those things over for you. Sooner the better. The sooner you get to me, the more I can guarantee that I'll give you feedback in time for you to be able to actually use it. But then again, this discussion of the Ta-Nehisi Coates reading and all of those, specific passages and questions that I kind of led you to. Really interested to hear what everyone might have to say about all that. All right, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.